The summer of 1995 in Willow Creek was a season of heavy air. The kind that clings to your skin like a second layer, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. It was a small town in the Midwest, a forgotten on the map, surrounded by a forest so dense it seemed to swallow the light, leaving only whispers of sunlight to filter through the canopy. My name is Joe Perkins, a drifter by trade, a man who'd worn many hats over the years, bartender in a dusty Nebraska dive, truck driver hauling freight through endless plains, construction worker piecing together homes I'd never call my own. I was 32 that year, a man running from a past I didn't care to confront, seeking solace in the quiet of small towns where no one asked too many questions. But Willow Creek wasn't the refuge I'd hoped for. It was a place where the shadows held secrets, where the trees whispered of things best left undisturbed, and where I would come face to face with a legend that would haunt me for the rest of my days. The Dogman, a creature that turned the stillness of the forest into a hunting ground for nightmares. Willow Creek was the kind of town where time seemed to have stopped, its streets lined with clapboard houses weathered by decades of harsh winters and unrelenting summers. The main drag boasted a general store, a diner with a neon sign that flickered like a dying heartbeat, and Joe's bait and tackle shop, a squat building with a sagging roof and a porch that creaked under the weight of memory. The locals were a tight-knit bunch, their smiles warm but their eyes sharp, always watching, as if they knew something you didn't. I'd arrived in town a month earlier, my beat-up pickup truck rattling to a stop outside the diner, its engine coughing like an old man with a bad cold. I'd taken a job as a handyman, fixing up old cabins scattered in the dense forest that surrounded the area. A gig that paid the bills and allowed me to stay under the radar. It wasn't glamorous work, but it suited me. I liked the solitude, the rhythm of hammering nails into splintered wood, the way the forest seemed to hold its breath around me. I'd made a few acquaintances in my short time there, mostly through Joe, the owner of the bait and tackle shop. Joe was an older man, his face etched with lines that told stories of a hard life, his grizzled beard the color of storm clouds, his voice a low rumble that seemed to echo the thunder that rolled through the hills on summer nights. We'd spend evenings on the porch of his shop, sharing beers and stories, the kind of tales that small towns thrive on. Gossip about who cheated at the last poker game, or the time old man Hargrave's barn burned down decades ago, the flames lighting up the night sky like a beacon. Joe had a way of making you feel at home, his laughter a deep, gravelly sound that filled the empty spaces between words. But that Friday evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood red, Joe's tone shifted, his eyes darkening with something I couldn't quite place. "There's an old hunting cabin deep in the woods that needs repairs," he said, scratching his beard with a calloused hand, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the forest loomed like a silent giant. "Place has been abandoned for years. Folks say it's haunted, but I don't hold with that nonsense. Still, nobody's been up there in ages. You up for it?" I shrugged, the weight of my empty wallet pressing against my thoughts. A job was a job and I needed the money. "Sure, Joe," I said, taking a sip of my beer, the cold liquid a sharp contrast to the heat of the evening. "Just give me the directions, and I'll head out first thing tomorrow." The next morning, I woke before dawn, the sky a pale gray streaked with the first hints of pink. I packed my tools and some supplies into my pickup, a rusted toolbox, a thermos of coffee, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and drove to the trailhead Joe had described. The road wound through the forest like a snake, its curves sharp and unforgiving, the trees pressing in on either side, their branches scraping against the truck's sides like skeletal fingers. I parked at the trailhead, a clearing barely large enough for my vehicle, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The forest was waking up around me, a symphony of chirping birds and rustling leaves, but there was an undercurrent of something else, a stillness that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I locked the truck, slung my toolbox over my shoulder, and started the hike, the path ahead barely visible beneath a tangle of vines and underbrush. The trail was overgrown, the kind of path that hadn't seen a human footprint in years, its edges blurred by ferns and brambles that snagged at my boots with every step. The trees towered above me, their trunks thick with moss, their branches interlocking to form a canopy that filtered the sunlight into a dim, greenish haze. The air was thick with the scent of pine and decay, the ground soft and spongy beneath my feet, each step sinking slightly into the earth. It was a 2-hour hike to the cabin, and by the time I reached it, my shirt was soaked with sweat, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts, my muscles aching from the effort. The forest had grown denser the deeper I went, the trees closing in like a living wall, their shadows stretching long and thin across the path, as if trying to hold me back. The cabin was a relic of a bygone era, its wooden frame weathered to a dull gray, its roof sagging like the spine of an old dog, its windows shattered, their jagged edges glinting like broken teeth in the faint light. The door hung off its hinges, creaking in the faint breeze, and the porch was littered with leaves and twigs, a testament to years of neglect. It was the kind of place that looked like it had been abandoned for a reason, a place that didn't want to be disturbed, its silence a warning I didn't heed. I set to work immediately, the rhythm of my hammer against wood a comforting distraction from the unease that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I nailed boards over the broken windows, patched holes in the walls, reinforced the sagging roof, each task a small victory against the decay that surrounded me. The forest watched me, its silence oppressive, the occasional rustle of leaves the only sound beyond my own labored breathing. Around midday, as I was fixing the door, I heard a rustling in the bushes nearby, a sound that stopped me cold. I paused, my hammer hovering in the air, and looked up, my eyes scanning the treeline. Nothing, just the endless expanse of trees, their trunks dark and slick with moss, their branches swaying slightly in the breeze. Probably a deer, I thought, trying to convince myself, but the feeling of being watched lingered, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck that I couldn't shake. I forced myself to focus, driving nails into the doorframe with more force than necessary, the sound echoing through the clearing like a gunshot. But the unease grew, a creeping dread that settled into my bones, as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. By late afternoon, I'd made good progress. The door was secure, the windows boarded up, the roof no longer in danger of collapsing. I decided to take a break, sitting on the porch with my water bottle, the cool liquid a relief against the heat of the day. The forest was eerily quiet now, the earlier sounds of wildlife gone, replaced by a silence so deep it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something else, something musky and primal that I couldn't quite place. I scanned the treeline, my eyes searching for movement, but there was nothing, just the endless expanse of trees, their shadows stretching long and thin across the clearing, as if reaching for me. That's when I saw it. A figure standing just inside the treeline, half hidden in the shadows, its form barely discernible against the backdrop of dark trunks and tangled underbrush. At first, I thought it was a person, maybe a hunter or another hiker who'd wandered too far from the trail, but as I squinted, trying to get a better look, my blood ran cold. It was tall, unnaturally so, at least 7 feet, its body covered in dark, matted fur that seemed to absorb the fading light, making it look like a void against the greenery. Its eyes glinted, a sickly yellow that pierced through the gloom, and I could see the outline of pointed ears, a long snout, a face that was neither man nor beast but something in between, a grotesque parody of both. Its claws were long and curved, glinting faintly in the dim light, and its posture was hunched, predatory, as if it was poised to strike. I blinked, my heart pounding in my chest, and it was gone, as if it had never been there at all, the treeline empty once more. I shook my head, trying to dispel the image, my hands trembling as I set the water bottle down. "Get a grip, Joe," I muttered to myself, my voice sounding hollow in the stillness. "You're just tired, been working too hard." But the unease settled over me like a shroud, heavy and suffocating. The image of that creature burned into my mind. I decided to pack up and head back to town, gathering my tools with shaking hands, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds, half expecting to see that figure again. The hike back was tense, the forest darker now, more oppressive, the shadows stretching long and thin across the path, as if trying to swallow me whole. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, set my nerves on edge, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. By the time I reached my truck, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the world in deep blue twilight, the forest a wall of darkness at my back. I jumped in, locked the doors, and drove back to town as fast as the winding roads would allow. The image of that creature a constant companion in my mind, its glowing eyes staring at me from the shadows of my memory. When I got back to Willow Creek, I went straight to Joe's shop, my hands still trembling as I pushed open the door. He was closing up for the night, his silhouette framed in the dim light of the shop's window, a broom in his hand as he swept the floor. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong, his brow furrowing with concern. "Hey, what happened out there?" he asked, setting the broom aside, his voice steady but laced with worry. I told him about the figure I'd seen, the words tumbling out in a rush, my voice shaking as I described its towering form, its glowing eyes, its snout-like face. As I spoke, Joe's expression grew serious, his eyes darkening with a knowledge I wished I didn't see. He didn't laugh or dismiss it like I expected, didn't tell me I was crazy or seeing things. Instead, he nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond me, as if he could see the creature himself. "Yeah, I've heard stories," he said quietly, his voice low and measured. "Old legends about a creature that roams these woods. Folks around here call it the Dogman. Most think it's just a myth, something to scare kids into staying out of the forest. But every now and then, someone sees something they can't explain." A chill ran down my spine, colder than the evening air, my stomach twisting into knots. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, a trick of the light, a product of exhaustion and isolation, but Joe's tone told me he believed otherwise. He'd lived in Willow Creek his whole life, had heard every story, every whisper, and the look in his eyes said he'd heard too many accounts like mine to dismiss them as fantasy. "Look," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but not unkind, his calloused fingers digging into my jacket. "Best stay away from that cabin for a while. Let things settle down. Whatever you saw, it's not something you want to tangle with." I nodded, my throat tight, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I left the shop and headed back to the boarding house where I was staying, a creaky old building on the edge of town with peeling paint and a roof that leaked when it rained. I tried to sleep that night, but the image of the creature kept me awake, its glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness behind my closed lids, its snarling snout haunting my dreams. Over the next few days, I tried to put it behind me, taking on other jobs around town, fixing a fence for the diner owner, patching a roof for a widow on the outskirts, keeping myself busy, avoiding the woods as much as possible. But the town was on edge, a tension simmering just beneath the surface, a fear that seeped into every conversation, every glance. People started disappearing. First, it was a local hunter named Ben, a quiet man who'd lived in Willow Creek his whole life, known for his skill with a rifle and his knowledge of the forest. He went out one morning to check his traps and never came back, his cabin left empty, his truck still parked in the drive. Then, a couple of hikers, city folks who'd come to Willow Creek for a weekend getaway, vanished without a trace. Their campsite found abandoned, their tents slashed open, their gear scattered across the forest floor. The whispers grew louder, rumors spreading like wildfire through the town, carried on the wind like the scent of smoke. Some said it was a bear, a rogue animal driven mad by hunger, but others murmured about the Dogman, their voices hushed as if speaking its name might summon it from the shadows. One night, about a week after my encounter, there was a town meeting at the community center, a squat brick building that smelled of old coffee and desperation, its walls lined with faded posters from long-forgotten events. The room was packed, folks gathered in tight knots, their voices low and nervous, their faces pale in the harsh fluorescent light. The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man named Harland with a mustache that looked like it had seen better days, stood at the front, his hands raised in a futile attempt to calm the crowd. "We're doing everything we can to find the missing," he said, his voice gruff but steady, his eyes scanning the room. "But we need your help. Stay out of the woods until we know what's going on. If you see anything unusual, report it immediately." The crowd murmured, their fear palpable, a living thing that filled the room like smoke. I stood at the back, my arms crossed, my mind racing with images of the creature I'd seen. Its glowing eyes, its snarling snout, its claws that glinted like knives. As the meeting broke up, Joe pulled me aside, his eyes hard with determination, his jaw set in a grim line. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice low, his gaze piercing. I nodded, my throat tight, the memory of that day flooding back with a clarity that made my stomach churn. "Yeah, I did, and I think it's real." Joe's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking in his cheek, his eyes narrowing as he looked at me. "We need to do something about this," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "Come by my shop tomorrow. We'll figure it out." The next day, I met Joe early, the morning air crisp and sharp against my skin, the sky a pale blue streaked with wisps of cloud. He had a map spread out on the counter, its edges curling with age, its surface marked with faded ink and pencil lines. He traced his finger across the paper, marking the locations where people had gone missing, his brow furrowed with concentration. "There's a pattern," he said, his voice grim, his finger tapping a cluster of red dots. "It's circling the town, getting closer each time. Whatever this thing is, it's not just hunting. It's stalking us." We decided to set up a patrol, a small group of trusted men from town, me, Joe, and 3 others. Sam, a trucker with arms like tree trunks and a laugh that could fill a room. Eddie, a logger with a scar across his cheek from a bar fight years ago, his eyes always scanning for trouble. And Paul, a quiet mechanic who'd lost his brother to the woods a decade earlier, his face etched with a grief that never quite faded. We armed ourselves with rifles and flashlights, our faces set with determination, our hands steady despite the fear that gnawed at our insides. We ventured into the woods that night, the air thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, the darkness pressing in on all sides, every shadow a potential threat. The forest was a different place at night, its silence oppressive, its shadows deeper, more menacing, as if the trees themselves were hiding something. We moved quietly, our boots crunching softly on the forest floor, our flashlights cutting through the darkness like knives, their beams wavering with every step. The air was cold, our breath visible in the faint light, the chill seeping into our bones as we walked. Hours passed, the night growing colder, the forest growing darker, and I started to wonder if this was a fool's errand, if we were chasing a ghost, a myth born of fear and superstition. Just when I was about to suggest we turn back, we heard it. A rustling in the bushes, followed by a low, guttural sound that sent a jolt of fear through me, my heart leaping into my throat. We froze, our flashlights scanning the darkness, their beams darting from tree to tree, and then it appeared, stepping into the light with a grace that belied its size. The creature was just as I remembered, but now it seemed even more menacing, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence, its snout twitching as it scented the air, its claws glinting in the beam of my flashlight. It stood on 2 legs, its body a grotesque blend of man and beast, its fur matted and dark, its muscles rippling beneath its skin, its presence a physical weight that pressed down on us. Sam raised his rifle, his hands steady, his eyes locked on the creature, but before he could fire, it lunged at him, moving with a speed that defied its size, its claws slashing through the air. There was a blur of motion, a scream that tore through the night, and Sam was gone, dragged into the underbrush before we could react, his flashlight rolling across the ground, its beam flickering and dying. Panic set in, our formation breaking as we scattered, firing blindly into the darkness. The sound of gunshots echoing through the trees, the smell of gunpowder sharp in the air. I ran, my heart pounding in my chest, branches tearing at my clothes, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the forest a blur around me. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the woods, collapsing against a tree, gasping for air, my hands shaking as I clutched my rifle. The others stumbled out behind me, their faces pale, their eyes wide with terror. Joe, Paul, but no Sam, no Eddie. They were gone, lost to the darkness, their screams echoing in my mind like a haunting refrain. The next morning, we regrouped at Joe's shop, shaken and defeated, our faces etched with exhaustion and fear. 2 men were missing, and we had nothing to show for it but our own terror. The memory of that creature a weight we couldn't shake. The sheriff declared a state of emergency, his voice crackling over the radio as he ordered everyone to stay indoors after dark. His words a desperate plea for safety in a town that no longer felt safe. But the disappearances continued, the town gripped by a fear so thick you could taste it, a metallic tang that lingered on the tongue. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being hunted, that the creature was toying with us, biding its time, its glowing eyes watching from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One night, unable to sleep, the weight of the past weeks pressing down on me, I found myself back at the trailhead, staring into the dark forest, a rifle in my hands, a flashlight at my side. The air was thick with tension, the silence of the night broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I had to know. I had to end this. I ventured back to the cabin, my boots crunching softly on the forest floor, my flashlight casting long, wavering beams across the path, the shadows dancing like specters in the dim light. The forest seemed alive now, its silence a facade, its darkness hiding something ancient and malevolent. As I approached the cabin, its silhouette stark against the moonlight, I saw a figure standing on the porch, his form illuminated by the pale glow of the moon. "Joe," I whispered, my voice trembling as I approached, my rifle raised, my heart pounding in my chest. He turned to me, his face pale, his eyes hollow, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. "I had to know too," he said, his voice barely a whisper, his hands trembling as he gripped his own rifle. "I've been tracking it. I think I know where its lair is." We moved silently through the woods, Joe leading the way, our flashlights casting long, wavering beams across the forest floor, the air thick with the scent of pine and decay. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees pressing in on all sides, their branches scraping against our clothes, their shadows stretching long and thin across the path. After what felt like hours, we came to a clearing, and in the center was a large, cave-like structure, half hidden by foliage, its entrance a gaping maw of darkness that seemed to swallow the light. "This is it," Joe said, his voice trembling, his eyes fixed on the cave, his hands tightening around his rifle. We moved closer, our boots sinking into the soft earth, the smell hitting us first, a rancid, decaying stench that made my stomach churn, my eyes watering as I fought the urge to gag. Inside, we could see bones, scattered and broken, some human, some animal, their surfaces stained with something dark and sticky, their shapes illuminated by the faint glow of our flashlights. There was something else, a nest made of branches and leaves, its edges crusted with dried blood, its center a hollow space that seemed to radiate a primal energy, as if it was the heart of the creature's domain. Suddenly, there was a sound behind us, a low growl that made my blood run cold, my heart leaping into my throat. We turned slowly, our flashlights trembling in our hands, and there it was, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching us with those glowing yellow eyes, its snout twitching as it scented the air, its claws glinting in the moonlight. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the creature's gaze locking with mine, a silent challenge that sent a shiver down my spine. Its body was massive, its fur matted and dark, its muscles rippling beneath its skin, its presence a physical weight that pressed down on us. Then Joe raised his rifle and fired, the shot ringing out through the trees, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. The creature howled in pain, a sound that was both animal and human, a scream of rage and agony that tore through the forest, lunging at us with a speed that belied its size, its claws slashing through the air. I fired too, my hands shaking, my heart pounding in my chest, and the creature stumbled, dark blood pouring from its wounds, staining the forest floor, its movements slowing as it collapsed to the ground, its massive body heaving with each labored breath. We approached cautiously, rifles still trained on it, our flashlights illuminating its form, the shadows dancing across its fur. As we got closer, the creature's form seemed to shift, its features becoming more human, its fur receding, its limbs twisting into something more familiar, more tragic. In its dying moments, it looked at us with a strange, pleading expression, its eyes no longer glowing but dull, almost sorrowful, its snout softening into a face that was almost human, its claws retracting into hands that were stained with blood and dirt. Joe knelt beside it, his own face etched with a mix of horror and awe, his hands trembling as he studied its features. "It's not just an animal," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's something else. Something that was human once." The creature took one last shuddering breath, its chest rising and falling one final time. And then it was still, the forest around us holding its breath, the silence a heavy weight that pressed down on us. We stood there in silence, the weight of what we'd done sinking in, the reality of the creature's existence a truth we couldn't unlearn. In the aftermath, the disappearances stopped, the town slowly returning to a semblance of normalcy, the fear that had gripped Willow Creek easing like a storm passing over the horizon. But the memory of that night lingered, a shadow that refused to lift, a scar that refused to fade. We never spoke of it again, Joe and I, but the knowledge that there are things in this world beyond our understanding stayed with me, a constant companion in the quiet moments, a whisper in the darkness. I left Willow Creek not long after, unable to stay in a town that held such memories, unable to walk past the forest without seeing those glowing eyes, hearing that guttural growl. I drifted from job to job, town to town, always looking over my shoulder, always wary of the shadows, the creature's face haunting my dreams, its pleading expression a question I could never answer. Years later, I still think about that night, about the creature we faced, the lives it took, the terror it wrought. I don't know what it was or where it came from, but I know one thing. Some legends are real, and they're more terrifying than we could ever imagine. The woods of Willow Creek remain a silent testament to the horrors that transpired, a place where the shadows hold secrets too dark to unearth, where the trees whisper of things best left undisturbed. And as I sit here, penning this story for you, I can't help but wonder, could you face the Dogman, knowing what it's capable of, knowing the lives it's claimed? Would you dare to venture into those woods after dark, with nothing but a flashlight and a prayer, knowing that something ancient and malevolent might be waiting? Some mysteries are better left unsolved, but for those who seek the truth, the shadows are always watching, always waiting to whisper their secrets.